Hello everybody, I am the Dire Duck. With the Murder finale now being out for a while, it gives us the time to reflect back on the show and give some attention to some of its lesser discussed elements. So today, we're going to talk about another one of the show's forgotten characters. You know him, you probably don't think about him very much. It's the one and only Khan. No, not the YouTuber, the Murder Drones character, #1 dad and door connoisseur.
Guys, my daughter is into doors!
Indeed, we're going to be speaking about Khan, which really should have been quite obvious from the title and thumbnail, but maybe you're clinically blind. Khan is another character whose usage falls off a cliff after the first couple episodes, just like poor old Fad. But fortunately for Khan, he doesn't quite get as bad as Fad and has a lot more going on, even if most of it is implied off screen. But even so, Khan is another member of the cast who looked like he was going to be a significant player in the story, but just like many others, he is rapidly forgotten about. But why is this? This is the question that I aim to answer today. We will go back and have a look at who Khan is, what role he serves in the show, what happened to him, and finally we can speculate on what Liam and Glitch could have done differently with him. But before we begin, remember to construct that like button and knock that subscribe button, as each one gets Khan another door to add to his collection. Let's start with who Khan is.
Dad?
Well, he mostly fits into the single parent leader archetype you see in a lot of animated shows. Though of course in Murder Drone they up the ante quite a bit, making Khan more of a comedic obstacle for Uzi, with him constantly getting in the way. He ends up leaving Uzi for dead in the pilot, with the rest of the show spent on him trying to be a better father and redeeming himself, giving Uzi more attention, for better or worse, and trying to generally be more helpful. This is a nice little arc, but it happened mostly off screen, leading up to the viewer to assume these changes have happened with his character based off a couple of moments. Though, this assumes that Khan actually did anything wrong by leaving Uzi, as you can very much see it as Khan choosing the safety of the colony that he's responsible for over gambling on the functionality of his daughter's invention, the same daughter who caused the situation in the first place. But the show clearly intends for us to take that scene as him being a bad father, so we will operate under this assumption for the rest of the video. Khan is the second member of what I like to call the Forgettable Four, with the other being Fad, who's already had his video, which you should totally watch by the way, and the other being Jay and Dole, whose time will come. The Forgettable Four all share the same things in common. Their usage all falls off a cliff after the first couple episodes, though Khan does get a better sprinkling of character moments throughout the series, more than the other four, but just like the rest of them, he shows up in the final 2 episodes only to do next to nothing. So in terms of what he actually does in the series, well, he's established to be the de facto leader of the WDF and the colony as a whole. He's the father of Uzi, obviously. He is also stated to be the one who built the protective doors that shield the worker drones, and is, well, quite obsessed with them. In episode 1, he catches Uzi and tries to prevent her from leaving the bunker until he is deceived by her. It is also revealed here that he had to personally put down Nori. We next see him after N massacres the WDF, with him being frozen in fear before abandoning Uzi and shutting the door on her to stop M from breaching further into the colony. Though this is all for naught, as we see him cowering later on at the presence of J and V, leaving Fad to get the tar beaten out of him. After the big climactic battle, he gets chewed out by Uzi before she leaves with N. In episode 2, he attends the parent-teacher conference, and over the course of the conference, he kind of breaks down a bit and gets quite defensive, defending Uzi's behaviour and blaming everything else but Uzi herself. He is interrupted, however, by someone alerting him to all the murders that have been going on, thanks to Eldridge J. He is then later killed, quote-unquote, by Eldridge J, which freaks out Uzi, but this turns out to be a fake, of course. Though, interestingly enough, it does cause Uzi to embrace Khan when he shows up with the other WDF members, acting more like a real leader, and stares down N as he leaves. In episode 3, he confiscates Uzi's deranged drawings and makes an attempt to bond with his daughter, which goes as well as you might imagine. However, because it's prom, Khan gets her address and makes her go with Dole and Lizzie, not realizing that that wasn't the best idea. He also announces that he's going to be chaperoning the prom, but considering the fact it's Khan, he can't really do very much, but he does make an effort to help Uzi before getting solvered by Dole. In episode 4, we see him in a flashback showing Uzi more secrets about her mother and giving her more support in getting to the bottom of the solve of mystery, trying to be a more supportive and helpful parent. He appears very briefly in everyone's favourite Crow-related episode, expressing joy that Uzi had finally made some friends and had them over for a sleepover, much to the chagrin of Uzi herself. However, this is interrupted by Khan getting yeeted into a wall by Doll. Now, if I had a nickel every time the subject of this video gets clowned by a magic Russian robot, I would have 2 nickels, which can't buy you anything in today's economy. We next see Khan in episode 7 marching around outside trying to rebuild the railgun and ordering Lizzie and Thad around. He informs them that Nori predicted the end of the world was going to happen and that the planet was going to try and eat them. So they all saddle up in the magic school bus to try and stop it. The episode ending with the 3 of them staring down Jay. But after all that, in the finale, he spent 95% of the episode doing nothing, until his big moment. He does the unthinkable. He actually achieves something. He slams his precious doors on Sin, saving En's core. After the fight, he nearly falls in a hole, gets saved by Nori, cools her hot, gets solved by Uzi, and then appears in the credits. So, that's everything that Khan does in the show. As you can see, Khan appears in all but episode 6, but doesn't really do anything of note. We do get some nice character moments from him, but he mostly serves as a plot device and source of lore. He does have his big arc, if you can call it that, with him being less of a coward and being a better and more supportive dad. But all this growth happens mostly off screen, and we never really get any final payoff to it, or have the show acknowledge it in any meaningful way. Unless you count the door slam at the end as the conclusion, which to me seemed pretty weak. Now for the big question. Why is this? Why does the show undersell Khan, and why does he never quite get enough time in the spotlight to truly bring his arc full circle? Well, for one, Khan was originally conceived as a completely different character. Rather than the comedic, dopey, minor obstacle that he was in the actual show's pilot, he was supposed to be a much more serious and jaded character, while serving as a bigger antagonistic force in the show's story, to the point where he basically becomes a villain. Hell, he even has a pistol and a cool scar to sell this. But obviously, this changed long before the pilot's release. He instead was made into a more comic relief type character. However, as you may have noticed, most of the rest of the side characters in this show also fulfill the same comic relief role, meaning that Khan is constantly competing for screen time in his crowded niche, with his main distinguishing feature being that he is Uzi's dad, and of course his love of doors. Now, you can only take door jokes so far, making his main trait simply being Uzi's dad. Now, to the show's credit, they do quite a bit with this in the early episodes, having Uzi's teenage angst bounce quite well off Khan, with himself being kind of a straight man to Uzi's gremlin energy. We also get to see him try to do more parent-related things, to little success mind you, but the effort is there. And it is insinuated that he didn't try very hard before this, so his attempt now show a bit of the mythical character growth. But we unfortunately only get little snippets of this, with it mostly being implied off-screen. But for a Murder Drone side character, especially when compared to the rest of the Forgotten Four, it is a pretty good showing, all things considered. Though, there is one problem. As previously mentioned, the show never fully completes Khan's arc. The show never really acknowledges Khan at all, or the changes he went through. When you really think about it, does Uzi acknowledge that Khan tried harder to be a better dad and saved her boyfriend? No. Does Khan and Nori ever get to talk about anything? You know, Nori, Khan's wife, the wife he stated himself they had to put down, the wife he did everything in the show for and presumably cared a lot about? Nope. Does he even recognize her in the finale? Nope. When you look at the episode, the 2 things he does is get the railgun back into the plot, which does next to nothing in the end except give Jay a haircut, and he shuts the door on Sin. After all his character growth and all that build-up, it all amounts to him closing a door. Well, I suppose there's a pleasing circularity to it, if nothing else. Now, why is this the case? Well, it's probably for the same reason as most of the characters, the show's rewrites. After the early concept phase of Khan being a villain, they settled on him being a more comedic father figure type character. That was written into the plot when it was a much more episodic focused show, centered more around the colony, up until around episode 4, where it shifted to being more of a grand mystery type story. This is why he had a fairly good showing in the earlier episodes, but appears very sparsely after that. As the show shifted its focus away from the colony, it meant that Khan, as the leader of the colony, had less and less to do. This made Khan a character that was ultimately written for a different show than the one we eventually got. But Lib and Glitch likely realised that they needed to resolve Khan's arc in some way, so they chucked him into the final battle with the rest of the B team. Though, unfortunately for him, with how rushed the finale was, they didn't have enough time to properly resolve any of his plot lines, so Khan ends up being brought back into relevance, only to be placed in effective limbo in terms of development, until the show ends. So, what could they have done to improve Khan's character? Well, I think the first thing they could have done is they could have killed him off early. This could have been done in episode 3 by having him take a stand against Dol and being the one to save Uzi instead of N, however it cost him his life. But would give Khan a bit of a redemption arc for the show, and cut his character off nice and early. Alternatively, you could have him go to Camp 98.7 in episode 4 with the rest of the cast, as it seemed to be the place that he met Nori after all, so surely it is the place that's significant to him that he'd want to go to. He could help provide more useful information to Uzi over the course of the episode, and they can have a little bit more of a talk about Nori than what they actually did in the show. They could get their little heart-to-heart and semi-makeup, only for Solver Uzi to tragically kill him at the end of the episode. This will give a lot more weight to Uzi's rampage in episode 4, rather than her butchering a bunch of nothing characters. It would also allow there to be a bit more of a setup to Nori's return, and actually have it mean something, as we get to hear about her from Khan a lot more. It would also add some much needed tension and horror back into the show, which it sorely needs, making death not just the joke that it is often portrayed as in the series, which has the side effect of undermining a lot of other moments in the show. Finally, it nicely wipes him off the board so the show can freely shift its focus away from the colony and be a nice endpoint for that arc of the show. If we are looking for a scenario where Khan doesn't die, we could have him take more of an active role in the plot, again going with Uzi to Camp 98.7 but not dying. He could also use his position as head of the WDF to be more of an active participant in episodes 7 and 8. We could see little segments of him actively providing leadership to the colony, directing the people to safety and being a sterner and more confident leader, before then going out with Lizzie and Fad for the final confrontation. This would be good as we never really get to see what happened to the colony during the events of episodes 7 and 8, or how any of them end up surviving. So Khan could fill that role. Now, Khan can't do much of the physical fighting himself, but what he could do is blast Jay or Sim with the railgun, doing some real damage to one of them and saving Uzi. This will bring his arc full circle, from him choosing not to trust Uzi and not using the railgun, to him being a supportive dad that fights alongside his daughter. It wouldn't take too much screen time to have this happen either. 1 or 2 short scenes could really tie this up quite nicely. Finally, we have to have him interact with Nori in the finale, either making that scene after the battle a bit longer, or having a scene during the ending school bit, as we really need to see Khan and Nori have a conversation somewhere in that episode, as it is such a missed opportunity and it really leaves a massive hole in his character. But at the end of the day, Khan came out of MD looking a lot better than most of the other side characters in the show. He was at least able to be in most of the episodes, even if only briefly, though he is still one of the many characters who feel incomplete. But just like Fad, if we were to give Khan more screen time and spotlight in the show, we would have to take it away from some other part. So I guess the real question at the end of the day is, would it be worth it to make that change? What do you think? Let me know in the comment section below. Anyway, that'll be all from me. Remember to like and subscribe and do all the other things that every other YouTuber tells you to do. I would really appreciate it. And yeah, check out my other videos, some of which are even good. And I hope to see you all again very soon. Bye bye.